Hi, and welcome to the Hidden Gifts of Loss podcast. Today, my guest is Jean Green. And before we started recording, we were talking about how we both got into podcasting because we're both kind of new. Her podcast is Your Life Over 50. And I love that because that is so open. Your topic, your life could be so many things, especially I think as women, maybe before 50, we're living for everybody else, but then afterwards you have a little bit more freedom. At least that's what I have found. And we met in Find Your Voice challenge. And incidentally, I just always loved hearing Jean's posts because I think you have the most beautiful, like calming, soothing voice. So I'm very happy to have you on today and thank you so much. So tell me how you got into podcasting.
Thank you, Julie, for inviting me to be a guest on your podcast. It is so exciting to be here with you. Now, the way I got into podcasting was by chance, in a sense. I am in Toastmasters, and one of the electives out of a number of them was podcasting. And that was sounded interesting to me because there was only one other blogging that I could see myself doing. The rest of them was just kind of, yeah, don't want to do it. So, so I decided podcasting, but then it was how do I do it? How do I do a podcast? And I started reading and watching YouTubes on how to do a podcast. But I am tech challenged, so I wasn't able to connect the dots. And then I saw Stacy's invitation for the Find Your Voice Challenge or the Podcasting Challenge, 17-day challenge. And I took a chance on it because I thought if I'm doing this, maybe this will help me. But then I didn't know what to call it. And one day I was walking down the hall, and it was like the Holy Spirit just whispered and said, "It's your life over 50." And it had a ring to it and it just stuck. And I mentioned it to a couple of people and they said, well, why not this and why not that? But it's like, no, your life over 50. And so that is my podcast, Your Life Over 50. As women, and as you said, once we hit 50, it's our life because we before spent time, so much time, not begrudgingly because we love doing it, raising our kids, taking care of husbands, maybe other than working, trying to have a side hustle on the side. But there's so much going on that we tend to forget who we are. So over 50, it's almost like that little rose bud began to bloom again.
Mm.
We began to recognize that we're important too, and there are just so many other things we can do. So in your life over 50, my goal is to spread the news of things that ladies over 50 are doing and how satisfying it is for them, even some of their challenges in getting there. So that is how I got into podcasting, and I am loving it. I really am. It is another way of finding my voice is by sharing information through podcasting.
Mhm. Yes. Yes, well said. I am loving it too. And I love that I get to meet people and talk to people that I wouldn't have otherwise met. It's just been so fun. And I'm about to be 60 this year, so like, yeah, definitely over 50. Um, so it's interesting about like how we get here and all the things that we go through earlier in life. And I know that you had mentioned that for me, it was a loss that empowered me to take a chance and start a podcast. And you mentioned that you've had so many losses. It was the loss of my mother in particular, and you said that you felt that that was pretty significant in your life as well. Um, yeah. So, what would you like to share about that, about that experience of losing your mother and how that impacted you and informed the rest of your life choices?
Sure would. My mother has been gone for about 20 years. It doesn't seem that long, and I still carry a, a tinge of guilt, I guess you would say, because my mother lived like 2,000 miles from me. And she initially, well, my mother was this caring person, and she was a caregiver to so many of her family members, her siblings, and all. And she was a caregiver, and she gave so much of herself. She really also, I tried to get her to come and spend time with me, but it was always, well, who's going to take care of this person? Who's going to take care of this one? And she never did. And one of her sisters had, she was diabetic, and my mother was caring for her. And my aunt passed away in her sleep. And my mother felt it was her fault because my aunt died from a diabetic coma, I think they say. So my mother had fallen asleep because she would almost stay up around the clock going in to check and making sure, everything was right, all of the levels. But this particular night, she fell asleep and did not make her rounds, so to speak. And she felt that if she had not fallen asleep and had gone in, even if my aunt had been in the coma, she would have found her in time to call 911, and she would have been saved. So my mother had this guilt of she wasn't there when she needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And her health started to go down. And I'm not a doctor, have no medical training at all. But in my opinion, based on the things my mother did, and my cousins were all there, she had a nervous breakdown. But her doctors would not treat her for a nervous breakdown. And I went home, and I would go about every 3 months or so, and I would talk to a doctor and say, look, can't you just treat her with as if she had a nervous breakdown? If it doesn't work, then okay. But it was no, no, no. Your mother has dementia and is going into Alzheimer's. And I said, okay, but try taking care of the nervous condition. But they wouldn't listen. So
Oh,
my mother just continued to deteriorate, and I started sending herbs and vitamins home for her to take. And when she was taking the B vitamins, her mind would become more stable.
mm,
But it was, she got to the point to where I know it went into dementia after a while. But I
mhm.
honestly think if she could have been treated for the nervous condition, perhaps it would have prolonged her life before dementia set in. But in any case, I had to get someone to stay with her around the clock, because before she got to the point of not of just being out, and I was there, and I said, Mom, you got to come home with me because I'm too far away to care for you. And she just, in her mind was clear. Her youngest brother and I we really kind of battled it out, because he said I should have brought her anyway, and said that my mom didn't know what she was saying. But she was very clear, and she said, please don't take me out of my home.
Mm.
Whatever you need, but please don't take me out of my home. Well, it got to the point to where I knew something had to be done. So I talked to her doctor, and he said, well, we can sedate her to get on the plane ride and get home. He said, but if she said those things to you, I can promise you she'll be dead within a year of you taking her. Now, I didn't want that, because
Yeah.
then I would have been carrying the guilt
Mhm.
that I killed my mother. And I listened to her because one of her friends lived behind her, and she could, on Sundays when they come home from church, they kind of, they could wave out the window almost at each other. And her friend got dementia, and her daughter came and took her, to live with her.
Mhm.
And my mom was really upset. She said, she ain't gonna last long because she has been in that house all the time and she knows where she's going. And true, I think within less than a year, she had passed away. So when my mom begged me not to take her out of her home, I remembered the conversation she had about her friend, and so then I had to look for someone who could stay with her night one and the day. In the last year of my mom's life, my aunt, well, my uncle's wife would stay at night, and my cousin would stay during the day. So she had the family there, and she would know they were family, and she was happy about that. But I still felt that it was my responsibility to take care of my mom, and I wanted to,
Mhm.
but it was like this toss up. Do I have her sedated and bring her to live with me and then she doesn't make it? Or do I follow her request, her plea in a sense, and leave her in her home and just have someone there to care for? So even going home about every 3 months or so, I still have this tinge of sadness, I guess,
Mhm.
that I wasn't there. But I was able to go home, and it was very hard. But my cousin called and said, if you want to see your mom alive, you need to come home now. And I had planned, I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks out. I already had my ticket to come home. She said, no, you need to come now. And I flew out, got home, went in, and my mom recognized me, but she couldn't really talk.
Mhm.
And it was like she passed away the next morning.
Mm.
And that was really difficult because I would go in her room and I would sit for a while. And then I just couldn't stay because she would, I mean, by that time she was breathing rather deeply, and I knew the end was close.
Yeah.
And and then I would go out, and it was like I have this voice in my head saying, but you're leaving her in there by herself. So I would go back in, I would sit down, I would talk to her, I would read to her. And finally, I don't know, I finally went in and went to bed. I got up. I think I slept maybe a couple of hours, got up, went in. She was still breathing. I
Mhm.
took my shower, got dressed. She was breathing when I came out. The restroom was right across from her room, so her door was open. She was breathing. I walked in and looked. I went in, finished getting dressed, and when I came out, she was gone.
Yeah.
So it was it was hard. It was
Yeah.
hard to kind of know, but I was glad I made it home
Mhm.
to see her before she left. I was glad.
Yeah.
But that was very difficult, and I thought I dealt with it,
Mhm.
but I knew something. Well, no, I didn't know what was wrong, really. My mom loved Christmas, and so do I. And so when it started getting near Christmas, we would call and say, oh, I saw this store already got that Christmas decoration out. I'm going to do this for Christmas. And it was this whole thing from like November, December. We would be calling back and forth of this is what I saw today. And after my mom passed, it would it was like as soon as December, the calendar flipped to December, I would get this real heaviness.
Mhm.
And I didn't know I really did not know what was wrong.
Mhm.
And my kids and all, it would almost be Christmas Eve before I could force myself to go and get gifts for them. And I kept thinking, why? I used to always, the first Saturday of December would be when I would go out, get all the gifts, get it, and I couldn't do it. It was not until my husband passed and I went through grief counseling that I realized I really had not dealt with my mother's loss. And so, because she loved Christmas, when December hit, I went into this protective depression, I call it.
Mhm.
And I could not uh, concentrate on buying Christmas gifts. But then, like, day before Christmas Eve, I knew I had to get my kids some stuff. So I would force myself to go out. So it was in going through the grief counseling after my husband passed that I realized I had not dealt with losing my mom. And
Mhm.
I honestly, and it's probably shameful to say, but I'm still working through that even now. But this past Christmas, I kind of flew through and I thought, oh, yes, I may have this under control now.
Oh, wow.
Yes, so that's
Yeah.
that's
So
how.
how long after your mother passed then did your husband pass?
Mm, about 10 years,
Okay.
about
Wow.
10, 11 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, you just had that protective depression. I understand that, it just you're not ready until you're ready. But I my mother also loved Christmas so much, and she there's so much in what you just said that I understand, like that the guilt sometimes, like you were managing everything and you weren't even there. So, when I hear you say that, I think like how much more it took to make sure she was taken care of, even though you weren't physically there. And the fact that you honored her wishes, I think that's so beautiful. That's what she was clear. She wanted to stay in her home. My mother also, she stayed in her home. I had only 10 weeks from the time she was diagnosed because it was pancreatic cancer stage 4. So, you don't get very much time. And
Mm,
so live in Ohio and I went into California and it was right at the start of the pandemic.
mm,
But I'm so grateful that I had those 10 weeks. But
yeah,
but what you're saying about that moment of loss, you went and took a shower, the breathing, there's something about you feel like in your mind, I should sit with her this
mm,
whole time. But there's something about that end of life breathing that I think you have to step away for a minute. And we had the hospice nurse come that night and I had been sitting by her bed off and on throughout the day, and I was so tired that I was literally like my head was literally, I was nodding off, and the hospice nurse said, "You," she said, "Why don't you lie down on the couch?" And I thought it hadn't occurred to me, that I could even do that. And it was in that moment, however long I must have dozed off for, it was in that moment that she
mm,
passed. And I thought, oh,
yeah,
there was that as a daughter, I think there was that little bit of I wasn't there, and yet we showed up. I can hear in your story that you were there
mm,
as I was. And I know for that first Christmas, it was so hard because my mother, same as your, like Christmas, that was her big thing. And my mother would send boxes because we lived on opposite coasts, and she would always put little notes, little sticky notes on everything, kind of like explain, like a prelude to the gift. And some of them were just so silly, like, so my daughter, I would kind of make fun of it sometimes. It's like, really, you needed to write like on a little bag of, she'd send weird little things too, like a little bag of bag chip clips or something like that, right? And she put a little note that said, always useful, right? Like, you're not gonna figure out, what do you do with these chip clips, right? So that Christmas, yeah, like you, it was so hard to do Christmas. Had only been a few months, and
Mm,
I didn't wanna do it, but I thought, "Well, I have to. My daughter, I have to get gifts for my daughter, even though she's an adult," but she said, "Mom, don't open any packages that come. I don't want you to see anything." It wasn't really like her to be that excited about Christmas, right?
mm,
So finally, Christmas morning, she was up before everybody. And this is a child, we used to have to wake her up, even as a young child. It wasn't like that when I was growing up, man. You were out of bed before everybody. So she was so excited. She's like, "Mom, I want you to open your gift first." So I'm like, I can't imagine what this could be. So I open my gift and I take the paper off. It's a postal box, USPS, the priority mail box. I'm like, okay.
mhm.
I look at the writing. It looks just like my mother's writing. It's addressed to me in my mother's writing and with my mother's address written as the return address. I open this box. My daughter recreated exactly the kind of box that my mother would send, even down to the sticky notes.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
wow.
was speechless that she would think to do this. And she was with me as my mother was passing. I couldn't have done it without my daughter. So
Mm,
that was like a huge hidden gift that my daughter gave me that I never expected. And
wow. She was
yeah,
sensitive enough to remember what your mom did. And that was a double gift to you, wasn't it?
huge.
Mm,
Yeah,
major.
yeah,
Wow. Mm, oh
yeah.
my.
Wouldn't have got through that first Christmas
Mm,
without that gift from my daughter. So yeah. Wow, but I really feel for you that you had that for 10 years, really. That
hmm.
you
Yes,
I think that's how important our mothers are in our lives.
that is true. That's true. Yes. So, yes, but like I said, last Christmas, it was a breeze. And after Christmas was over, I thought, oh, I didn't go into depression this year. Okay.
Yeah. Nice.
Wow. Nice.
Yeah. Ah, there is so much healing in loss. It's like you don't think so. You don't expect it, but and
That's true.
then and then your husband as well. Wow.
Yes.
And
Yeah. Yeah. His his death was a shock in a sense. He passed away from lung cancer, and when it was found, it was stage 4. It was already stage 4, but they said with treatment he could have, and no one ever knows, but they said 12 to 18 months. So we thought, okay, we'll do these kinds of things. 2.5 months later, he was gone.
um,
So and it was like he went to bed his jolly self and he just didn't wake up.
mm,
So that was that was a total shock. And I think that not not having, I mean, I don't think we can ever prepare for the loss of a loved one. But when the expectation is we have this amount of time and we can do these things, and then all of a sudden it's like it's over. There's so many, I had so many questions and so much, why did this happen? And so yeah, it was, yeah.
yeah.
Hmm. Yes, it was, that was a, that was really a dynamite. Okay, so I went through grief counseling for that. It's like, okay,
Mm,
I had to make sure I was okay to be there for my kids going
Mhm.
through the situation. So I just had to take care of me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so hard when
Yeah.
you've got other people depending on you, and yet
Mm,
you're in this grief, and I've wondered about that, how like, just the difference between, like, a shocking, like, sudden, like, tragic death, versus when you
mhm,
have some time. I mean, I have not experienced that, knock on wood,
mhm.
but, wow.
Yeah.
So grief counseling, though, really helps you, I think, talking about it. You know,
Mhm.
I had grief counseling in a sense, in that, after my mother had passed, I was kinda like, I mean, it was really all I thought about, it was always on my mind. I mean, 4 years later, it's still on my mind a lot, because here I am doing this podcast, right? But I had an end of life doula who I had found, online, and I didn't even know it was a thing, and
Mhm.
she and I talked every Sunday for an hour for 12 weeks. And it was so amazing and healing, and I think, yeah, that was my version of grief counseling, and I feel like anybody who is going through, dealing with grief, that some kind of grief counseling, just somebody that you can, because you feel like, you don't wanna talk about this all the time with your friends, right? Or
Right.
when you first meet somebody, it's not like like, "Oh," when it's a birth, "My daughter had a baby," right? Everyone's like, "Yay." But when it's a death, you're like, "Oh, no, is she gonna talk about that again?" It's yeah. So I think
Mhm.
it's so important, and, so now that you've, been through all of these things, I feel like, yeah, I can, I think it makes you bolder to go after your dreams.
I think so. Yes. It's like,
Yeah.
what can be worse? You know?
Yes, right, exactly, and you know what's important, and like, "Hey,
Mhm.
I'm not gonna let fear stop me," but, I know you
Right.
said you're not, like, tech challenged. I'm a little tech challenged too, but look at us. After 50 and we're starting
Still doing
podcasts, and
it, right?
yep.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh, I
That's
love it.
right. Yes. Oh, yes.
Mm, good
And
stuff.
no time to just sit.
Mm-mm.
Mm.
No. Do you find that you're busier now that you are, like, retired?
Yes,
You
absolutely. I am so much busier. And I do different things, and I don't know why, but sometime I will be with a friend or someone, they'll go, "Well, what do you do every day?" It's like, I don't keep a schedule. I'm busy. Okay. I am busy. Even my kids will say, "Well, mom, you ain't got nothing to do. Why can't you just come over here and stay with the kids?" Okay, I love my grandkids and I love to come over, but I can't just always do it at the last minute because I have things to do.
exactly. It's like we get to put ourselves first now,
Yeah,
not, I mean, of course, if somebody has a need, we will take care of them, that's what we do
absolutely.
as women, but yeah, I love that.
Mhm.
So what are some of the other things that you do?
See, there you go.
Right, right? You're like, "I don't know." It's freedom, right? It's freedom. Do
Freedom.
whatever we
I,
want.
as I said at the opening, I'm in Toastmasters, and because I'm an introvert and a person really of few words, in order to prepare the speeches and all of that, it take a lot of time for me because then it's like, okay, it need to be on this subject or in this category. So now I need to Google and see, well, what's out there and what's this. So that just take time to do that, and it take a lot of. And then I am in other online groups, and that
Mhm,
takes time.
mhm.
And I just love to go to coffee with a couple of my friends, and our coffee at 10 will usually last till 12. And It's just multiple things that I get involved in to do.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
life, right? I mean, we're living our lives.
Yes.
Yeah.
And now with the podcast, editing the podcast take quite a bit of time with
It
me remembering,
does.
okay, now what did I do before to get this? So it take
Yes.
it take quite a bit of time.
How come I was able to do this last time, and now when I look for that button, it's not there anymore?
Exactly.
And I was and, yeah, I listened to it, like, I use, Descript to edit the podcast. It was something that Stacy talked about, and they'll do little workshops, and I
Yeah.
sound old when I say this, but, like, the kids who come on and do these workshops, they're wonderful. They go so fast. I back up. Oh.
Oh, I know. I use an Adobe product,
Hmm,
and maybe 5 years or so ago, I was in the audio video ministry at church, and I was one of the video editors. So we used that program, but then when COVID hit, we stopped editing and ended the contract with the local TV channels and just started streaming on Facebook and the other platforms. So I no longer use that. And I thought, okay, let me use it for editing the podcast. I was like, how could I forget so much in 4 years? So it's like, okay, YouTube video. And I'll go through that. It's like, oh yeah, that's how I do it. I'm halfway through and this is not working. Have to go back to it.
oh my god. I know, but right? But good for us, man. We're doing the thing.
Yes, we are.
We're doing the thing, which is where we met. So,
That's right, doing a
oh,
thing.
wonderful talking to you. Is there anything else that I haven't asked you that you would like to share about your podcast or any transformations that you've gone through after losses?
I think the only thing I could perhaps say about loss is I think we need to recognize that grief come about not only from the loss of a loved one, but grief can also come by, say, losing a job or even in retiring. There is a loss. That is a loss. It's not a loved one, but it's a loss. So we still go through that grief process. And I think the sooner we recognize that there are other types of loss rather than the human, I think if we recognize that and deal with those and accept that this is a loss and there is a grief process, we would be better off. But and for instance, when I retired, I was totally ready. But that was a major change from working over 30 years to now having freedom, so to speak.
Mhm,
There I grieved not having to go to work, but the work friends
mhm.
that I no longer saw on a daily basis, and the routine of getting up, doing certain things. That was totally different. So I had to work through that. And I've talked to a number of people. If we can recognize the fact and accept that, there we just grieve it and go on, and we'll be much lighter and feel much better. Again, I have no medical knowledge. That's just personal experience for me of recognizing the losses. And doing the thing with the podcast has just been so wonderful. I would recommend it for anyone who think they have a love for meeting people. And as I said before, I'm an introvert, so interviewing people for the podcast is a safe way to get to know people and hear their stories. And 'cause we connect through stories, and if once we recognize that, we're people. And I
Mhm. So powerful. I love hearing people's stories, and I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah, and that's such a good point. Loss can take so many different forms.
Hmm.
And I know people maybe retire and they're like, "What's wrong with me? Why am I feeling this kind of way about this?" And it's a loss.
It's a loss. It really
Yeah,
is.
you're absolutely right. Recognizing it is so important. So
Yeah. Hmm.
wonderful words of wisdom, Jean. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on, and I can't wait to check out your podcast too.
Too. I was listening to yours before we came on, and I'm really enjoying it. So, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Uh,
Wonderful. All
uh,
right. We'll talk
okay.
soon.